Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are going to take a look at Enemy at the Gates. Specifically, how historically accurate are the small arms represented in the movie Enemy at the Gates. Of course, it takes place in Stalingrad during World War II, specifically the fall of 1942, and our very first issue comes up right there in the movie poster with that left-handed Mosin gun. And you may be thinking, wow, I didn't know they made a left-handed Mosin gun. They, in fact, did not. But that rifle actually never shows up in the movie because it's not actually real. What they did was just take a photo of a normal Mosin gun sniper and they reversed it in order to give the layout that they wanted for the poster shot. So kind of a red herring, doesn't actually show up in the movie, but we need to mention it before we go any further. Also, before we go any further, I want to point out I'm not trying to assess the overall historical accuracy of Enemy at the Gates. There's lots of issues with it. Lots of people have covered that. You know, did they actually send guys in to fight without weapons? Well, yes, but also no, and not really the way it's shown. And that's a huge rabbit hole that we're not even going to get into. I just want to look at the small arms specifically. So there are two primary ones, of course, that are the main focus of the movie, and those are the sniper rifles. We've got Vasily Zaitsev's Mosin M9130 PU, and we have Major König's, well, it is actually a single claw Mauser K98k sniper. Now, when looking at that 9130 PU, it looks right. Like, I can't really find anything wrong with it. The scope's right, the mount's right, it's used properly. There are a few weird bits in there where, obviously, for cinematic visual effect, they will show guys aiming, but with their face way too far back in a way that you could never actually, like, your way out of the eye box of the scope. You couldn't actually see anything. But most of the time, actually, the sight's put in the correct place, the guy's holding it right. We see a bunch of 9130 PUs because it's not just Zaitsev that has one, it's basically all of the snipers around him, which is, well, which is not correct. However, the problem is they have done a very good job of showing you the rifle that Vasily Zaitsev did not have in Stalingrad. And that's because the 9130 PU, with that very distinctive short scope, was not actually in service until like December of 1942 at the very earliest. I think the very first ones rolled off the production line in October. So yeah, there are going to be some people who will say, oh, well, you know, he was a famous sniper. He could have gotten the newest, greatest thing just off the production line, except for two things. First off, when he first got to Stalingrad, he wasn't a famous sniper. And secondly, we know he didn't use a 9130 PU. He actually used a 9130 PEM. That's a side rail mount scope. It was the predecessor to the PU. It was the predecessor to the semi-auto SVT sniper. And how do I know that he used it? Well, I've got a picture of him with it right there. There's actually more than a few photos of Zaitsev. I mean, they're all propaganda photos taken by the Russians at the time, or maybe after the war, but presumably at the time, because he's got the actual rifle that he would have been using at that time, and it's the PEM. So differences there. The PU is a 3.5 power scope. The PEM is a 4 power, so a little bit better magnification. The rifle that they're mounted on is essentially identical. PU snipers were intended to be manufactured to the same standard of quality and fit and finish as pre-war Mosin gun snipers. Now, I don't think they ever quite managed to pull that off, but it's not like the PU was massively cruder than the pre-war snipers. In terms of practicality, they're really pretty close. The PEM is a better scope. The PU was developed to be cheaper and cost-effective and to work on the semi-auto, which was a problem. We don't need to get into that. That's a topic for a separate video. But like, Enemy at the Gates does a really good job showing you a really good rendition of the wrong rifle. Now, Vasily Zaitsev was wounded in January of 1943, which is just about when PUs would have actually started getting on into soldiers' hands at the front. He was wounded in Stalingrad. It took him a month or two to recover. And when he did recover is probably when he actually got a PU sniper. Because the other thing people will say, I suspect, is, you're wrong, Ian, he did use a PU because his very rifle is in a museum in Stalingrad. And you're right, there is a rifle attributed to Zaitsev, and in fact, I'm reasonably sure it is Zaitsev's rifle in the museum in Stalingrad, but a guy like Zaitsev had more than one rifle, and there's no way that he had a PU when he was actually fighting in Stalingrad, even if when they put the thing in the museum, they said, or he said, that it was. That, I suspect, is Zaitsev going along with the story that needs to be told. And apparently it is really his rifle. It's just his rifle from after Stalingrad. And the PU was absolutely the most common Soviet sniper rifle of the war. They made almost 400,000 of the things, way more than they did the pre-war PEs or PEMs. So that covers Zaitsev's rifle. To my mind, it doesn't really take away a whole lot from the movie. A little bit, but honestly, it's not like in Saving Private Ryan, where they have like a major scene in the movie based on something that's totally impossible, where he swaps scopes around on his rifle with one that never, they didn't do that. It's a movie focused on snipers, heavily dedicated to sniper rifle use, and they never show anything that I can find wrong with the employment of the rifles. So our second gun then is going to be Major König's Mauser. Now, Major König most likely didn't exist, so there's a little bit of historical wobble room for what rifle do you give a fictional character. However, they have done the same thing with Major König that they did with Vasily Zaitsev, and they've, as far as I can tell, done a really good job of showing you an accurate rendition of specifically a single claw K98k Mauser sniper. The Germans had almost half a dozen different sniper rifle patterns. They're all the same rifle, but they used a progression of different scopes and different mounts on them. And the problem here is the one they show König with didn't actually come into production until mid to late 1943. And we know very specifically when this movie takes place because there are a couple of scenes in there that specifically give you dates. And it's essentially the fall of 42, September, October, November of 1942. So before either of these rifles existed, including König's. Now, König's rifle we get a lot less detail on, and I'm not quite enough of an expert on German sniper rifles to know if it's exactly an accurate scope, but it is a single claw mount. It looks appropriate. And you also have a little bit of wiggle room because, in theory, König is the commander of the sniper school, and a character like that really would have some ability to pick whatever rifle he wanted. Although that doesn't mean that he could pick one that hasn't actually been put into production yet. So that's our second rifle. We don't get as many details on it. It's a little less relevant to the story. Oh, but there is one other thing. Sorry, before I get sidetracked here. The one thing that they get wrong about König's rifle is its reticle. They do a great job with the PU reticle, the Russian reticle. The German reticle, in actuality, would look basically the same as the Russian one. And the filmmakers clearly wanted to be able to distinguish between good guy reticle and bad guy reticle in the film. And so they give König this fantasy reticle, which my suspicion is they're like, we kind of want one that makes you think of a swastika. So they put these extra angle bars or straight cross bars on it that's not a real reticle that I'm aware of from anything. But I think it does give you this vague subliminal message of like bent cross sort of Germanic thing, and I suspect that's what the filmmakers were going for. Now, there are two other rifles that I think are worth pointing out in the film. They show up very briefly, but to me they're interesting and they're weird. And the first one especially is the rifle you see in the very beginning and then also in the flashback when Vasily Zaitsev is this 5-year-old kid and his grandfather is teaching him how to shoot and tells him to shoot at a wolf. The rifle that they show there is weirdly, it is a sporterized 9130 PU Mosin. So this shot, theoretically, is going to be taking place in the 1920s, early 1920s, because Zaitsev is 5 years old. I don't know how old he would have been. I probably could find out when he was born. But anyway, this is well before the adoption of the 9130 in 1930. The rifle that they show, first off, the front sight has been replaced with very much a sporter style sort of gold bead on the little built-up mount. And then we do get a nice shot of the action of the rifle, and you can see that it was a PU sniper, and they've put a little filler plug of wood in the spot where the stock is cut out for the PU scope. There are two screws in it that are a little bit odd. And then the grip has actually been hand checkered, which was never done on factory Mosens. So that one's really weird to me in that that is, in theory, that's, well, actually, I guess it's kind of the same thing as with all the previous rifles. That's, in theory, what Vasily's grandfather might well have been using in 1948 if the movie, took place later, because he would have taken an army rifle that he brought home with him and, maybe lost the scope or didn't have the scope or whatever. And so he rebuilds it to work with iron sights and makes different iron sights that he likes better than the standard infantry 9130 sights. The problem is they've taken what is a plausible 1948 rifle and stuck it in like 1920 something, when it couldn't possibly exist because the changes that are made, like it's based on a rifle that didn't exist until 1930. The base rifle until 30, the scoped version until 1943. So that's kind of weird. And then there's one other oddball rifle that shows up, I think, twice. We see it when we first see Tanya, Rachel Weisz's character, when she comes into this underground little home that they're living in. She's got a Mosin with her. And if you look at IMFDB, they'll say it's an M38 carbine. It is not. It looks like someone's recreation of like a partisan rifle, where they had a damaged Mosin, they repaired it with K98k parts, because it specifically has a sling that goes through the middle of the stock, which is the German style of sling attachment. And then the front sight on it is a little weird. It's like a Kar98 carbine, not Kar98k, but like the Mauser 98 carbines, the K98AZ pattern of rifles. Sort of a hemispherical front sight, protector wings. It's hard to see because we only get a little glimpse of it. We get one more very brief glimpse of it later on when one of Zaitsev's companions is shown carrying it. At first, when I see it early in the movie, I'm thinking, oh, they're trying to show that she was like militia, partisan, she didn't have a standard army issue rifle, and so they give her this, and in that sense, it's kind of a cool, historically accurate thing of, we're never going to talk about this. It's only going to show up very briefly in a couple little shots, but for the sharp-eyed, they'll notice it and they'll be like, oh, the filmmakers understand what's going on with the small arms here. It is a little weird to see her in Stalingrad with it, but okay, whatever. And then it's weird when Vasily's buddy has it, helper has it, because at that point he is in the army. Why doesn't he have his regular rifle? I wonder if it is just a matter of, during the filming, that was one of the prop rifles available, and maybe that guy took it unintentionally. I don't know if it was deliberately supposed to be in the film that second time or not, but it's an odd thing worth pointing out. Most of the rest of the small arms looked really good to me. The one other interesting thing that I noticed is there are a couple scenes where you'll see elite naval infantry, sailors. And it's basically every time they show boats crossing the Volga, there's a couple of Marines on board as, defense on the boat. They're often shuttling VIPs. And so these are bodyguard sorts of guys. And they're always wearing cross-brace Maxim belts of ammunition. Okay, fine. Like, that's legit, except every single one of them, they have only loaded every other cartridge pocket in the belt, which is totally hopelessly wrong. It's a very subtle detail, but it's really stupid, because what that means is you load that belt into an actual gun, and you're going to fire one round, and then you're going to have to manually cycle the gun to advance past the empty belt pocket to the next cartridge, and you're going to have to do that every single time. These belts will turn a Maxim into a single-shot rifle. Now, some people are going to say, oh, it's just decoration, and okay, that's plausible. Like, maybe it is. If they're just wearing it to look badass, okay, fine. You load half the rounds, and it's not quite as clunky and heavy to wear. Some people might suggest that they don't have enough ammunition because they're very low on supplies. Well, if that was the case, you load the front half of the belt and leave the back half empty so that you could actually use half the belt. This whole every other pocket thing is only functional as an aesthetic choice. On top of this, the one other tiny little detail I noticed that was a little entertaining to me is there was a guy in one of those scenes, an extra with a Mosin Nagant, who had a Finnish Mosin Nagant, and we can tell because it's got Finnish sling hangers on it, which is, I will give that a 98% chance of not being correct. I don't know enough about the exact location of different Russian units to say for sure that there wasn't ever a Russian unit that was deployed to Finland in the Winter War, managed to capture some already made Finnish Mosins, and then bring them back over to Stalingrad. I'm pretty sure that never happened, but it is theoretically possible that it did. But interesting that amongst all of the prop rifles for the film, clearly some of them were dressed up to be 9130 PUs. They're the hero rifles. That's what we want everyone to focus on. But there's lots of scenes where we need a bunch of extras with Mosens, and some of the ones that the prop supply company had available were clearly Finnish rebuilt 9130. So that is my take on the small arms accuracy of Enemy at the Gates. Honestly, pretty darn good. Like, yeah, they got the wrong rifle, but it's close. And even though it's the wrong rifle, both of the wrong rifles, they do a really good job with them. So props to the filmmakers for that. Obviously, there are a lot of other issues with many other elements of the film, and that's a subject for other people to delve into. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Go back. If you haven't seen Enemy at the Gates, check it out. See if you find anything they did wrong small arms wise that I missed. Thanks for watching.